Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Easton. I'm Maggie, Geary, and I will be assisting Ann Davis in leading today's worship service. We are joined by Dick Doughty, who will be providing the music. If you're new to UUFE, welcome to our celebration of inclusion. Whatever your background and beliefs, your ethnic, racial, or gender identity, or your sexual orientation, you are welcome here. After the service, all are invited to stay for conversation and socializing. Due to COVID, we will not be passing the basket for collection. The basket can be found in the bag on the side by the kitchen, and your gifts are much appreciated. Today's chalice lighting comes from our hymnal number 434 by Anonymous, and also number 447 by Albert Schweitzer. May we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring our gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to the community, and to each other. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. We will listen to Dick play Spirit of Life. Due to COVID, we will not be singing as usual. However, you may certainly hum along as you like. Please stand as we recite our covenant, and we have it posted here. At the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Easton, we seek to nurture spiritual and intellectual growth for all ages, and to be actively involved in community outreach and service, cherishing diversity, and celebrating our oneness with all humanity. We covenant to support each other in the spirit of compassion, respect, and love. Let us all hold these thoughts in our hearts as we now move into today's program, a special celebration with the poetry of inclusion. And we'll introduce the theme of the service and the poetry readers. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Excuse me. Well, when the call went out from Reverend Sue to consider leading a service this summer, and the suggestion was made to make it a poetry service about the theme of inclusion, I thought this could be interesting. Probably, it occurred to me that the poetry around the topic could be extremely interesting and varied, and diverse, of course, with it all coming together with the readers and the selections that they have made. I'm sure they'll come with various points of view and different emotions, and I haven't heard what these are, so I'm looking forward to it as much as I hope you are. So our readers today are David Stevens, and Suzanne Campos, who is maybe new to some people, Don Barker, and Judy Hedges. Thank you. Okay. David?
The poem I'm reading today is by Joy Harjo, an American poet, musician, playwright, and author. She's the incumbent United States Poet Laureate, the first Native American to hold that honor. She's a member of the Muskogee Nation in Oklahoma. Joy's signature project as the 23rd U.S. Poet Laureate is one of map-making, gathering the poems of 47 Native Nations poets. This anthology, Living Nations, Living Words, an anthology of First Peoples poetry, was published in May of this year. There's an online version at the Library of Congress website, which features the readings of one poem by each poet with a background commentary on the poem that they read. The poem that I'm going to read is from a book of Harjo's, Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings. This poem is called For Calling the Spirit Back from Wandering the Earth in its Human Feet. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off the cell phone, the computer, and remote control. Open the door and then close it behind you. Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth, gathering essences of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth, who has cared for you since you were a dream, planning itself precisely within your parents' desire. Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They will sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way, though there may be high-rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a year, a few years, 100 years, 1,000 years, even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense, inhuman feast set by the thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcome. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, and other healing plants. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go the pain you're holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain, your ancestors, to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. These helpers take many forms: animal, element, bird, angel, saint, stone, or ancestor. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that make your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would to a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from the wandering. It may return in pieces and tatters. Gather them together. It will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need sleep, a while after it has bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway and remember to keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark.
Good morning. My name is Suzanne Campos. I'm kind of new to the fellowship, but I'd like to give a little introduction about why I chose what I chose to present today. I worked in the public library for 40 years. During that time, I did many story times. My deal used to be I would come up with a theme, and then I would try and match books to the theme. I came to UU about 6 years ago. Started in the Annapolis Fellowship, moved to Dover, and now I'm here. One of the things I noticed in all of the different congregations that I was a part of is that they always did something for the children, a story for all ages. So when I was asked to kind of come here and present a poem, I looked for some heavy-duty stuff. Wasn't me. So instead, I looked for a children's story in rhyme. And what I found was a book called All Are Welcome. What I found for myself when I would listen to these stories that were presented, sometimes very complex ideas were easier to understand when they were presented in a simple way to the children. So I'm hoping that this will help us to understand inclusion and welcoming in a simpler way. So sit back, engage your inner child, and listen to the story in rhyme. All are welcome here. Pencils sharpened in their case, bells are ringing, let's make haste. School's beginning, dreams to chase. All are welcome here. No matter how you start your day, what you wear when you play, or if you come from far away, all are welcome here. In our classroom, safe and sound, fears are lost and hope is found. Raise your hand, we'll go around. All are welcome here. Gather now, let's all take part. We'll play music, we'll make art. We'll share stories from the heart. All are welcome here. Time for lunch. What a spread. A dozen different kinds of bread. Pass it around till everyone's fed. All are welcome here. We're part of a community. Our strength is our diversity. A shelter from adversity. All are welcome here. We will learn from each other. Special talents will uncover. There's a big world to discover. All are welcome here. So much to learn, so much to do. And when the busy day is through,
Can't wait to come back and start anew. All are welcome here. You have a place here. You have a space here. All are welcome here.
Aaron Copeland wrote 3 short pieces called 3 Moods, and I particularly like the second one called Wistful. It's a little bit different, so don't be surprised.
I'm really grateful to be here with you this morning. My name is Don Barker, and I'm grateful that Cam sent out the invitation for us to find a favorite poet, maybe read some favorite poets or favorite poems from a poet that we know well. I accepted that invitation even though I don't have a favorite poet, and I don't know if there are many poems, but I had a couple of experiences that helped me cross paths with a famous Black poet. It is about 3 weeks ago, just before Rita left for Chicago, we went out to dinner to celebrate our 43rd wedding anniversary. And we had to find a restaurant. Looking for a restaurant where we could eat outdoors, so I'm Googling restaurants, and I found one that I had heard about before. It's a restaurant called Busboys and Poets. Tom, you been there? Busboys and Poets, one in DC, so you probably know about it. So we were at this restaurant, looked at the menu, and I'm looking through the menu to try to get some clue to why this restaurant is named Busboys and Poets. And there was a little notation at the bottom of the menu that said that Langston Hughes, the famous Black poet, when he was a student at Columbia University, he was bussing tables in the restaurant to earn his way through college. And he knew that the famous poet was going to be at dinner that night. He was bussing his poet's table. So after he cleared the dishes, he dropped a couple of his own poems on this famous poet's table. And this famous person wrote about it next day. He did a reading, and the news media picked up on it. And he said, "I have met a busboy who is also a poet." And he named it, and that was an entree for Langston Hughes in his career of poetry. So with that experience of my own, I'm going to read a couple of biographical notes, and it suggests that might be useful to give some background to the poems. First of all, just from his biographical notes, I want to quote something said about his childhood. He had a pretty rough childhood. His parents basically abandoned him, and he was left to be raised by a grandmother. Later he wrote, "My theory is that children should be born without parents. If born, they must be." And then a couple of more notes. This is sort of the historical documentation of that incident that I just read to you. It says here that after a year at Columbia University, where he was the only black student living on campus. By the way, he was born in 1902, died in, I think, 1973, so he wrote during the 40s and 50s, Jim Crow, and before segregation, before integration. He was living on campus, and he held a series of jobs, including that restaurant job. He also traveled in Africa, France, and Italy. While his ship was steaming out of New York bound for Africa, the 22-year-old poet suddenly threw overboard all of the books that he had packed for the trip, thus symbolically unburdening himself of his past. He saved only his copy of Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, and that's going to tie into the selection of 2 or 3 poems I'm going to read to you. Returning to the States, he worked in a restaurant and one day put 3 of his poems beside Vasha Lindsay's plate. The famous poet announced at a public reading that he had discovered a busboy poet, and the newspapers covered the story. And partly as a result of this, Hughes received a scholarship to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to read just a couple of poems to you. Hughes was one of the first poets or black poets to really write in the vernacular, the black vernacular. And that's, as I understand from my recent readings about Langston Hughes, this was a reflection of his interest in and the influence of Walt Whitman, who had also written poetry in the English, white English vernacular. And Hughes clearly had seen Whitman as a hero of sorts. So I'm going to finish with the poem, which in fact Langston Hughes that Bojana introduced to us when she did a service back in January about Paul Robeson. Robeson is one of his most famous songs were taken from Whitman, but also with the influence of Langston Hughes. Now, as I looked through this book of selected poems that I've had on my shelf for many years, looking for Langston Hughes poems, I found that it was really hard to find poems about inclusion specifically. He sort of turned inclusion inside out and wrote about the black experience of being excluded still, looking forward to a day when blacks would be included fully in American society. So here's a poem called Dream Variations. To fling my arms wide, I should say before I read more of this, you really got to be a black person to read Langston Hughes. In faith, only my best. To fling my arms wide in some place of the sun, to whirl and to dance till the white day is done. Then rest at cool evening beneath a tall tree while night comes on gently, dark like me. That is my dream. To fling my arms wide in the face of the sun, dance, whirl, whirl, till the quick day is done. Rest at pale evening, a tall, slim tree, night coming tenderly, black like me. Many of his poems are influenced by the experience of slavery. He was of the generation where the generation before him was still telling stories of their first-hand experience with slavery. And then just after that, of course, the Jim Crow era, and for former black slaves, many were sharecroppers, and he wrote this entitled Sharecroppers. Just a herd of Negroes driven to the field, plowing, planting, hoeing to make the cotton yield. When the cotton's picked and the work is done, boss man takes the money and we get none. Leaves us hungry, ragged as we were before. Year by year goes by, and we are nothing more than a herd of Negroes driven to the field, plowing life away to make the cotton yield. And I'll finish with two more short ones. This is entitled Cross. And although it's written in the first person, very personal, I think he's talking about the larger context of integration with white society, being part of America, both of a black and white society. My old man's a white man, and my old mother's black. If I'd ever cursed my white old man, I take my curses back. If ever I cursed my black old mother and wished she were in hell, I'm sorry for that evil wish. And now I wish her well. My old man died in a fine big house, and my ma, she died in a shack. I wonder where I'm going to die, being neither white nor black. And then I'll close with this most famous of his poems. This is entitled I Too. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh, and I eat well, and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table. I'll be there when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen, then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am, and they will be ashamed. I too am American.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Judy Hedges. I'm sort of a relic UU, and this service always brings me out of the woodwork. So I'm delighted that the poetry happening is occurring. And I was thinking that my home, that's right here, my home library overflows with poetry books. And it's long been my way to turn to them to feel less alone in the journey. Yet more and more, I find the stuff of poetry in the everyday. Not organized into stanzas, but singing all the same. My forever favorite poet is Naomi Shihab Nye. I had an enchanted time with her recently when she came to the Easton Library a few years ago. She finds poems everywhere, in the broken, in the beautiful, in the commonplace, and through her vision and creation and whimsy, I have come to know that I always dwell in a possible poem. And so, I have two poems, but this first one, For a Shattered Time, a prose poem that affirms unity. She calls this one Gate 4A. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal, after learning my flight had been detained 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate 4A understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate 4A was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing loudly. Help, said the flight attendant. Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her her flight was going to be late, and she did this. I stopped to put my arm around the woman and spoke to her haltingly. As the phrase is in Arabic. The minute she heard my words, she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, you're fine, you'll get there. Who is picking you up? Let's call him. We called her son, and I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother until we got to the plane and would ride next to her, Southwest. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones and thought, this is the world I want to live in, this shared world. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for fun. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke a while in Arabic and found, of course, that they shared 10 friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up about 2 hours, and she was laughing a lot by then, telling about her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled out a sack of homemade mom cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, out of her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar. And smiling, there is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out the free beverages from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving us all apple juice, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with furry leaves, such an old country traveling tradition. Always carry a plant, always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones and thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in this gate, once the crying of confusion had stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Okay. All right. Some 20 plus years ago, in sharing a service with this theme, I found a kindred spirit in a shining soul, Sue Lowry. Thus evolved over 200 cups of peppermint tea and favorite verses read aloud, the gift of her vision also, that poems are everywhere. So Sue, to you. Okay, this is by Naomi also. Valentine for Earnest Man. You can't order a poem like you order a taco. Walk up to the counter and say, I'll take 2, and expect it to be handed to you on a shiny plate. Still, I like your spirit. Anyone who says, here's my address, write me a poem, deserves something in reply. So I'll tell you a secret instead. Poems hide in the bottom of our shoes. They are sleeping. They are the shadows drifting across our ceilings the moments before we wake up. What we have to do is live in a way that lets us find them. Once I knew a man who gave his wife 2 skunks for a Valentine. He couldn't understand why she was crying. I thought they had such beautiful eyes. And he was serious. He was a serious man who lived in a serious way. Nothing was ugly just because the world said so. He really liked those skunks. So he reinvented them as Valentines, and they became beautiful, at least to him. And the poems that had been hiding in the eyes of skunks for centuries crawled out and curled up at his feet. Maybe if we reinvent whatever our lives give us, we find poems. Check your garage. The odd socks in your drawer. The person you almost like, but not quite. And let me know. And take this refrain with you. What we have to do is live in a way that lets us find them.
We weren't sure how much time all this was going to take, so we had a few in our back pocket, and this happens to be one of them. This is a poem that is written by a man by the name of Charles Benfield. Couldn't find out too much about him, except that he lives in Georgia, and he works doing diversity training with different companies, and that can be easy in the state of Georgia. It's called I Am Diversity, Please Include Me. I'm present in every place you go, depending on your lens, I'm friend or foe. I'm a force to be reckoned with, like the winds of change, I move, I'm swift. I'm present when two or more are together. If embraced, I can make the good even better. I'm not limited to age, gender, or race. I'm invisible at times, and yet all over the place. Don't exclude me due to lack of knowledge. Welcome me like the recruit fresh out of college. Let me take my seat at the table, even though I may be differently able. My experience, my passion, the authentic me can help add value to your company. Learn about me, improve my underrepresentation, and I can provide a competitive edge to your entire nation. I exclude no one. I am strengthened by all. My name is diversity, and yes, I stand tall. Recognize me and keep me in the mix. Together, there's no problem we can't fix. I am your best hope toward true innovation, and so many I reflect hope and inspiration. Your lives and companies will continue to change. Thus, the need for diversity and inclusion will also remain. Do all that you can to truly embrace me and experience life's fullness totally. I'm the thought lurking behind the unfamiliar face. I'm the ingenuity that helps your team win the race. I'm the solution that came from the odd question that was asked. I stand out in a crowd when I, diversity, am allowed to be unmasked. I'm diversity. Embrace me and we'll journey far. I'm diversity. Include me and we will reach the shining star. Coupled with inclusion, our lights burn longer. Together we are smarter, better, and stronger. I am diversity. Yes, that's me.
And I just have one very quick one that I thought when I was Googling acceptance, this popped up, and it really is the epitome of acceptance. It's about love, so I'd like to just read this. It's by Turner Collins. Tell me about the things that make you happy. Don't stop. I love to watch your eyes glow and your aura change. I love watching you fall in love with yourself the same way I do.
Closing words today are from our hymnal, number 701 by Sarah Morris Campbell, and number 456 by Elizabeth Sells Jones. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of thought, insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.